Hey guys, gonna go over some more parts that I have put in the Glock 23. Um, Added a few things, just thought I'd let you guys know and sort of show everything on camera because it's easier for me to make a video and show all of this stuff while simultaneously talking about it than it is to just take a bunch of pictures and try writing it. It's just I find this easier for this sort of thing. So to start, I guess this is probably one of the more obvious ones. This is a Lone Wolf Alpha Wolf Extractor. It's a machined part, machined out of a block of 17-4 pH, I believe, stainless steel. Obviously, it's a very high polish part. Yeah, I picked this up because, for one thing, I thought it looked kind of nice being machined and polished like that, and two, it is a much more durable part than the stock one, so that if the gun were to be dropped with a loaded chamber and something impacts this, it's not going to break. The factory ones that are metal injection molded have been known to break when the gun is dropped with a loaded chamber. And if your extractor is broken, you have a single shot firearm, more or less. So, no good there. But this should fix that. Lone Wolf claimed that they did a drop test with this 1,000 times and the part did not break. And I think it looks quite nice. It just adds a little bit of, a little bit of flair, a little bit of bling to the gun. So there's that. No issues there. Yeah, and before I go any farther, I did do a 50 round check with this on Saturday. So yesterday, after I put all these other parts in that I'm about to talk about, I ran a box of 50 through it to make sure that there was nothing wrong with the gun right off the bat, and it ran just fine. No issues. The ejection was perfectly consistent with this. They were all going in the same direction. It wasn't random. They weren't coming back at my face or anything like that. It was basically straight out to my right and up at about a 45-degree angle. They were going out as consistently and far away from me as I would think it would be reasonable to hope for. So no issues there. I'm happy with this. I believe that was 35 or 40 bucks. I can't remember, somewhere in there. But for 40 bucks to have a part that's very durable and nicely finished, I'm fine with that. It takes away one of the only real weak links with these guns, which is that factory extractor that may, like I said, break if it's dropped on an empty chamber. Next is this. I decided to try a different recoil spring system than the one that I have from NDZ. No real reason. I just kind of figured I'd try it out. It was only 35 bucks. It is. Just give me a second. I have to relight my cigarette. It's 35 bucks. It was from RYG, Rock Your Glock, which is probably the douchiest name I think I've ever heard for a for a store. It's just kind of, I don't know, it just sounds really weird to me, but whatever. They seem to make decent parts. It's a Gen 4 specific part. It is, as you can see, all stainless. I can tell based on it's not going to show up on camera, but the way that they left the end here, the cap end, This is finished on a, or this is made, excuse me, on a lathe. I know what it looks like when a part is cut off using a lathe. It basically looks like growth rings on a tree. You can see the little tracks, you know, going in and in and in and into the center, where the carbide bit was, well, usually carbide. It might be high-speed steel, but I would assume that they would be using carbide for these, where it cut the part off. So it seems to be pretty nice. One thing that I do like about it a lot is that it adds quite a bit of weight to the front end of the gun, which gives it a muzzle-heavy feel when it's empty and gives it a much better balance when the magazine is full. So I you know, I like this quite a bit. It's a pretty substantial part. The end here, if I can get it to focus, the end here is there, and that end that hits the barrel, where it locks into the barrel or rests against the barrel, is much thicker than the stock part, which I haven't really heard many issues with the stock recoil spring, you know, breaking or anything like that, other than maybe the plastic will crack on occasion. But I don't know. This seems like a nice part. It is a factory spring weight, or at least that's what they say. I wish that they would have offered this in a heavier spring weight, but alas, they do not. So this was pre-assembled. It's just a drop-in unit. Yeah, nothing too fancy, but for $35 they give you a lifetime warranty on this, which I do, you know, feel a little more comfortable with that. I mean, that way, if anything does happen to it, I know they'll fix it, and it should be good to go. I'll rack the slide here and just sort of so you can see it is pretty heavy duty, solid steel, nice and strong. So I'm happy with that. And then obviously, as you can see, I still have the Alpha Wolf barrel in the gun. That has been fine too. Haven't had any feeding issues or anything like that. Although I have only ran about 3 kinds of ammo through the gun since I put that in it. The only ones that I've ran through it are HST 165 grain hollow points, American Eagle 165 grain FMJs, and also some UMC 165 grain brass jacketed FMJs, which brass jacketed FMJs, if you're trying to do barrier penetration, those are going to be the king, because that brass is quite a bit harder than copper. So those are, you know, I would pick those brass ones if I was doing any sort of stuff where I was shooting through hard barriers, but I don't know, just kind of an aside. Yeah, the barrel still works fine. Happy with that. It has I noted in the other video that the barrel bore was not as shiny as the stock barrel, and it's still not quite as mirror-like as the Glock barrel is, but after I shot it, it brightened up considerably, so it seemed to, you know, smooth out on the inside. Very nice now. Yeah, so no issue there. The other thing is, or one of the other things is, the slide lock here is an extended one from Gentra, Gentra. That is a laser cut and machined stainless steel part. I believe it's 416 stainless. So I got that because I wanted a laser cut and machined part to replace the stamped factory one. A part that's laser cut and machined is going to be more symmetrical and have cleaner edges, and potentially will be stronger than a stamped part, although I'm not entirely sure about the stronger part. I wouldn't really make too strong of a claim there. And it is extended, which is nice, although that's not really the reason that I got it. It does definitely make it easier to grab than the factory one for doing a breakdown. So yeah, I've been happy with that, although I may get a different one from Gentra. I got the bare stainless, and I was hoping that it would be nice and shiny like the other parts, but it's not, so I'm either gonna, I don't know, I think I might get their black finished one because it's this exact same part, but they put a nitride finish on it, so I might do that, but you know, not a big deal. It's ran just fine regardless. And yeah, you can see that the finish on that is a lot duller than the finish on the Extractor. So my plan for now is to grab some like an air tool or a Dremel and polish the front of this so that it's like a mirror finish like the Extractor, just to match it. And I might do that to this too, but for now I'm considering just getting a black one, so that it matches the pins and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm not sure. And then may polish this screw on the trigger here as well, if I decide to, just so that everything matches, because I'm kind of anal about that kind of stuff. Still haven't gotten any sort of upgrade for the slide. Excuse me, the slide release. I like the stock one, to be honest. It's there's no way I'm going to hit this inadvertently, even with my high thumbs grip where I'm doing this. Let's see if I can, yeah, where I'm doing this, there's no way that I'm going to hit this because there really isn't much. There really isn't much that's protruding. Yeah, so I'm going to try turning on a different light real quick, so just bear with me. I don't know how much that helped, but we'll see. So yeah, this is still stock, and I don't know, I've been looking at getting the Ghost bullet part for this. It's a forward slide release where there's like a little bullet shaped, oval shaped part that sits farther forward so that you still have a large, easy to hit surface with your thumb, but it's supposed to stay out of the way when you're using a high thumbs forward type shooting grip. And just to be clear, I know this looks like a joint, but it's definitely not a joint. I just roll my own cigarettes using papers that people usually use for joints, so it looks like a joint, but it's not. It's just tobacco. So, no drugs. I don't do drugs anymore. But yeah, anyway. And then I think that's it for the external sort of parts, but I'll show you one other thing that I've upgraded, and that is the locking block, which is now a Lone Wolf part. This is a machined stainless part made out of the same material as their Extractor, and I got this because the lockup surfaces are larger and more consistent than they are on the factory part, and it's obviously going to be a little bit more corrosion resistant than the factory part, which is kind of a bonus. And it looks shiny and cool, so that's always nice. You know, shiny stuff is cool. But yeah, that was like 35 or 40 bucks similar price to the Extractor. One of them was 35 and one of them was 40, and I don't remember which one it was. I think this was 35 and the Extractor was 40, but I can't be sure. So yeah, I've been perfectly happy with this. One reason that I was looking into this was because the pins were drifting around on me a bunch. These two pins, even during dry firing, they would move side to side, which I did not like. I'm not sure if the pins that I got with the gun are undersized, or if the holes in the locking block, the factory locking block, were oversized, or potentially both. Maybe both of them were on the high side. Well, one would be on the holes on the locking block may have been on the high side of tolerances, and the pins may have been on the low side of tolerances, or something like that. They were quite loose. So what I did was started looking into this locking block and kind of hoping that it would tighten things up, and it did quite a bit. The locking block pin is the upper one, the smaller one, and that thing, I actually need to use a hammer to drive it in there, and it is rock solid now. The trigger pin still moves a little bit, but it doesn't fall out or anything like that, and it didn't before, but it doesn't move as much as it did, and the locking block pin is not going anywhere now. I need a hammer to remove it or install it, so that is nice. I'm happy with that. Haven't done any real strict accuracy testing with any of these parts, but I would imagine that locking block does a better job of keeping the locking block and this slide lock lever. I would imagine that they do a better job at keeping everything consistently aligned than the factory parts, but I can't really be sure because I haven't checked it out. Yeah, and I think that's about it. I will say though that these sights have grown. I don't know. I've kind of grown tired of them because I can hit what I'm aiming at. But the precision is just not there for me. I'm starting to understand what Aaron Cowan of Sage Dynamics said about the big dot sights, how the sight picture is just very vague, and it really is. If you're trying to hit a general area, it's fine out to about for me, out to about 30 yards at the most. Like 25 yards and beyond, it gets very difficult to hit smaller targets with this. And I don't know if I like that very much. I don't think I like that very much, because to me, inside of 25 yards, if you're just trying to hit like a man-sized target, a human torso-sized target, the sights, you really almost don't even need them. I mean, you can just point and shoot at closer ranges, which is likely what you're going to be doing under a high-stress situation anyway, and you should still hit the target. But at longer ranges where you're actually going to have to aim pretty carefully, these are terrible. I can hit my keg at longer ranges, but the percentage is not nearly what I want it to be. It's just very difficult to line up, because what you have to do is put that circle under, put the circle on top of the bar, but it's just very vague and general. So it's, I don't know. I don't think I care for these very much. So Chad may have been right there that the other stuff on the market with a squarer profile would be better. So I think I'm going to change these out fairly soon, but before I do anything else to the gun though, I'm definitely going to get that TLR1 HL weapon light, because it runs just fine the way it is. I can still use these sights. They're not, the gun isn't non-functional or anything. They're just not super precise, but the rest of the stuff is fine. The gun runs fine. I don't really need anything else, and I think I think it would be best to get that weapon light now, because that would make a major change to the type of environment that I can use this effectively in. You know, tritium is nice, but if I can't identify the target, it doesn't matter. But having a very bright flashlight on the gun will obviously allow me to illuminate the target and actually decide whether or not I would need to shoot it. Especially for home defense, it would be great because none of my light switches are near my bed or anything like that. And if somebody busted in, it would be real nice to have a light on the gun that I could just point, and the TLR1 HL is bright enough to do a pretty decent job of blinding somebody temporarily also. So I think that's going to be the next thing that I do, and then after that I will look at other sight options. But beyond that, the stuff that I've done to the gun so far seems to be working fine. So, oops, there. So, that's kind of all I've got for now. Right now, the trigger spring that I have in there is still that New York 1 and Zev race connector. I have been experimenting with other stuff, and the only other satisfactory combination that I've found is a stock weight 5-pound trigger spring and the Lone Wolf 3.5-pound connector, which is right here. That is this part right here. You can see it's nicely finished, very shiny and smooth all over. It is a stamped part, so you know that kind of, I don't know, it bugs me a little, but it is what it is. It works fine, so not a huge deal. But I just like that this is like a mirror polish on this because it smooths everything up quite a bit. Yeah. Oh, one other thing that I forgot. I keep having to relight the cigarette because they kind of go out pretty quickly. Yeah, I got one other part from RYG, which is this safety plunger. It's kind of difficult to tell on camera, but it's much more rounded on the edges than the stock part. The stock part is basically a cylinder with a bevel around the edge, and this is like a dome with a flat spot on top. And it's fairly highly polished. It did do a really good job of smoothing up the take-up on the trigger. When you do a slow pull on the take-up, with the factory part in there, you can feel it engage that, and it kind of bump, like it kind of grinds over it. But with the RYG part, it's just a smooth swoosh back to the wall. So that's quite nice. I'm happy with that. And they also included a slightly lighter spring with it too, so it takes less force to push that up out of the way during the trigger pull. So that was like $15. Happy I did that. It's, you know, works fine. It smoothed everything out, so that was decent. And yeah, other than that, everything seems to be fine. So I think, like I said, for the moment, I'm gonna keep it like this, and probably get that TLR1 HL next. And then think about what I want to do with regards to the sights. I'm still not entirely sure what I want to replace these with, but one other thing that I would say about these sights that just came to mind is that when they're backlit, when you're in a dark environment and you're aiming into a bright environment, they're virtually useless if you want to have any kind of, you know, consistent shot placement, because the white paint is what you need to align these, and when they're backlit strongly, you don't see any of that. It's just sort of a rounded top post on this V, and you can't align them very well at all, which I do not like. And that's going to be especially important when the light is on the gun, because when you're using a light like that in a dark environment, the sights are basically constantly backlit. So these wouldn't really be the best for that, but again, you'd probably be point shooting anyway. But still, you know, it bothers me that they're horrible when they're backlit like that. They're virtually useless. So I still like this trigger. The trigger pull here, it's fine. I like this because in winter use, if my hands are very cold or if I'm using gloves, there's enough weight to the trigger that I'm not going to put a gloved finger or a cold finger in here and touch the gun off before I want it to go off. I can shoot this pretty well, even though the pull is a little bit heavy. It's just one smooth pull to the rear. So yeah, I might try a few different other connectors just to kind of mess around and see. Like one is from Ghost. It's called the Edge connector, and they claim that it eliminates that wall so that there's no take up and then wall and then break. It's just a smooth pull. So that seems like a very good idea when you combine it with this New York 1 trigger spring. So that's probably going to be something I'll try soon. But again, like I said, before I do anything else, I'm going to get that weapon light for this so that it's good to go functionality wise, and then I'll fine tune some other stuff later on. But for now, it seems to be working just fine. So yeah, that's the state of things right now with the 23.